So we have 4 generations at Detroit Future City, and I feel like that has added an enormous texture to the work. Because what ends up happening, you end up having to be open to new ways of working in ways that you haven't before, right? So the boomers and the Gen Xers at our organization are used to working 60 hours a week, 365 days a year, and taking calls late at night, early in the morning, on Christmas, whatever. The younger folks that are working for us have no interest in working like that at all whatsoever. Yeah. And so I think that's one thing. And they not only that, they are really they push for all of us to be really intentional, not only how we work, but how we talk to other people in the office, how we engage, what is comfortable, what is uncomfortable, what are the cultural norms for the people who are Black, for the Latino descent people who are working in the office, for the people with disability. Everyone who's with us has a different way of communicating and working, and I feel like that has only made our work so much better.
So I think before you can get to collaboration, you've got to get to the conditions where we respect each other. So at PolicyLink, I don't think, I think this is what equity looks like. If you can't do it in your own shop, it's kind of hard to be out doing it in the world. So the first thing is everybody needs to respect each other. I don't fetishize any age group. Millennials are no more right as Gen Xers are, or Gen Z, whatever. So I think we got to get out of this fantasy that one group is better than the other and we're pitting each other against each other. And before you know it, you really don't have anything to worry about out in the world because you can't handle the shit in your organization. And this is really important, folks, because we're tearing our orgs apart, judging each other. You're not Black enough. You're not straight enough. You're too old. You're too young. And the hypocrisy of it all. Equity, that's not equity. That's not equity. And so I don't know where in our movement we got so damn righteous that we think that we get to be judge and jury of everybody. And I start there because I don't see a lot of cross collaboration going on in the sector. I see a lot of bullshit going on in the sector. I see a lot of what I just described, tearing our organizations apart, locking them up, and we're not talking about it. And nobody's to blame. We all are to blame. And so what I would suggest is before you can get to talking about the fantasy of even collaboration, we've got to get really honest about what does equity really require in our orgs. It requires a tolerance of difference. And how dare us run around telling white folks all that they got to do and should do when we can't even talk to each other with respect. And so I start there because I think once you get that level of respect, you can really get to some exciting collaborations. I mean, one of the best things that just happened in our org came from somebody that ain't even in the leadership space, but is someone younger who gave an off-the-cuff comment to me walking to the area where you get drinks and stuff. And she simply said, I've been watching how we do stuff. I think we should go to a 3-year budget. That was actually, at the time, that was the right decision to make because we've grown so fast that now if we're not looking 2 years out plus, we can make a big mistake financially. And the beauty of having an org where you respect each other, she wasn't really worried about me being the president and CEO. She really gave me some real knowledge that today now is a part of how we operate. We just took our first 3-year budget to the board for approval. That only happened maybe 6 months ago. So I think when you have that level of respect, people will feel safe enough to give you really good insight about how to run the organization better.
Okay. Hello? Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah? All right. I think to Michael's point, I think that's a great point because I think they're lucky to have a leader and that's creating a space that allows for that, right? Where a lot of these organizations, in terms of how do you work with each other for Hispanics of Philanthropy, we are a multi-generational transnational organization. So it is about the multi-generational, but also the transnational component because we do have our colleagues in Mexico City, which is a whole different power dynamic when it comes to how we work from a south to north, north to south model. But I think that what we have tried to do is create an like culture that allows for learning with one another, that allows for mistakes and accountability from all of us so that I can hold my president and CEO accountable for any harm that she might do or say, not out of intentionality, but perhaps out of not knowing, right? In terms of how it is that we want to work together. What does it mean? We work really hard within our teams to kind of create these like what we call like zones of liberation in terms of how we work in our teams. If I can't move these larger systems across organization, at least within my teams, to your point, right? My team does not work after 6. And that's something that we scaled out to like the whole organization, right? So how do I also create cultures of care and rest that are intergenerational and that are informed by every member of the organization and where everybody allows for that kind of decision making and input regardless of what the title is or what positions they hold at an organization is important. But I don't think that that happens unless you have leadership that is fully like grounded in who they are and allow for that type of opportunity to begin at the organization because that doesn't happen anywhere. For me, that comes from the top in terms of how they create that culture to begin with. So.
Hi. So a couple of things. One, I want to lift up the fact that no real movement has ever been successful without young people being involved in it. So we have to not relegate young people to the kids' table at Thanksgiving. So if you accept that premise that you need young leaders in order to transform society, then you have to be intentional about making sure that young people are at the table and not on the menu, right? The second thing is that I think that it's very important to use our leadership in organizations and your leadership in your organizations as an opportunity to interrogate the way that Western thought has influenced the way that organizations are run, right? And in particular, this belief that an extremely extractive culture, right, that puts a precedent on the ability of a group to consume or either produce as the primary premise behind why they're important to an organization, right? And we have to, from my opinion, step away from that Western way of looking at organizations and as indigenous people, take a step back and really begin to look at, well, how were we working together at a time when our elders were honored and respected? So I actually have 5 generations in my organization. I have from baby boomers all the way down to teenagers, right? And all of them have an opportunity to sit around the table and engage in decision making. And for the leaders that are older, one of our key commitments, not only to ourselves, but to the organization, is to do all we can to make sure that we get out of the way when young people have innovative opportunities and have an opportunity to engage and lead. And not only to say it and it sound good, but we actually have a training called Adult Ally Training, which teaches our adults and leaders inside of the organization and outside of the organization to get out of the way of youth leadership, right? When it is time. Of course, all young people need guidance and instruction around certain issues, but I do believe on many occasions, what we gain in wisdom as we get older, we lose in courage. And so it's really important to make sure that you have that balance, not just because of the importance of us being able to connect, but also because young people have a way of bringing courage to a conversation that we sometimes forget because we're so afraid to lose something. And so, the best investment that you can actually make in our future is an investment in young people. And so we have to be intentional about that, and we have to be passionate about that, and we can't allow the old way of organizations, in particular how they are run and how individuals are valued, to influence our ability to create a new world. And the creation of the new world that we want to see has to begin with the organizations that we lead. It has to.
Well, I really now regret going last on this question. You guys have covered pretty much all of it. So I'm like thinking about what I will add to this, but I would go back to Michael's comment about respect. I do really think that is really at the heart of getting it right. Because there will be spaces where sort of experience and wisdom and how to run an organization, that's what might matter most. But sometimes, the lack of transparency and the why of it, I think is a problem. And some of that comes from, the scarcity mentality, where, people are, fighting over resources. And the fact that we're even having this conversation, I think if you doubled, tripled, quadrupled the money in these fields that we're in, it'd be a lot easier for us to do all this work in the first place. So people get very protective of what they're doing. And I think that leads to some of the fear to maintain an institution where it's very difficult to lead. But shutting out young people is not the right way to do it, and that often happens. And I think one approach that I try is, when there are hard decisions, we're the smallest policy academies organization up here. And it's just, this is what I'm contending with. Let me show you the constraints. And if we can get to that outcome with the way that you have come on in, I love to hear it. And let's discuss that, right? So I think actually that's part of the opening the door to leadership for the next generation, where you understand and see what the choice sets are, be a part of decision making, or at least have input to know that your voice is heard. And if you're hiring somebody whose decisions you don't at least respect to hear them out, that in and of itself is a problem. So I think really sort of being transparent about sort of what your goals and missions are and what decisions that you have to make as a leader in your organization, and sharing those with the people who are working to help you carry out that mission. And I think one of the ways that I even approached sort of creating the policy academies was actually getting behind young people. We train, folks in sort of policy research, and when I first started this, when they applied to be a fellow, it was really with their own understanding of research for them to ask the questions, to come up with policy solutions that made sense to them from the ideas they attracted from their own lived experience, and to work with leading think tanks to basically be a committee to support them in following the questions that they wanted to ask. And I think and I'm really going over time, sorry, but profoundly important things came from that. They were surfacing ideas that the field was not yet looking at, and this was at a leading think tank, the Urban Institute, I would say it, where I worked at the time. So I think they are looking at the role in a different way, and we should be listening, and they're forecasting what problems that are coming, and we need to be taking those seriously.
Thank you all so much for your answers there. And for Michael, Lynette, you took us to making sure we build that foundation before we think of collaboration, the transparency, the trust, the respect, and then all of you for sharing your concrete examples on how you as leaders are receptive and have done even mindset shifts on, your ways of working and not emailing on Christmas and all that stuff. Thank you all for sharing that. And Ashley's going to take us to our next question.
Great. So Marlene and I were really excited when Lynette asked us to moderate this. In many ways, because we both have benefited from mentorship, and we both have benefited from people pouring into us, opening doors for us, and creating space for us. I mean, notably, Lynette and Anika have both been invaluable mentors in my own career and opening up doors and creating opportunities. And so for this next question, we really want to segue into that conversation around mentorship and opening doors and the role that older generations, not old, but older generations play, and some strategies that you've all employed in terms of mentoring, supporting, and uplifting younger voices. And some of you started to touch on that, but really thinking about what role that plays in creating these more racially equitable policies. And so, Michael, hoping to start with you, in your work at PolicyLink, you are leading a movement, you are building a movement, and you've done a great job of incorporating youth as part of that. Can you talk a little bit about the role you're playing with youth as you do this movement work around racial and economic equity.
So, well, PolicyLink is an exciting place because people want to work there. It's one of the few places you can do this work and not have to fight about it. And so, having amazing, talented people come to the organization is not a problem. Getting them to be lifted up is a problem. But what I would also say is getting people to get over the feelings that they're not good enough. You know, so much has been beat out of us that we don't even know day to day. That one of the most important things I think we can do in our space is help people be reminded that they're good enough today. They got there for a reason, and it's time for them to put it all on the table. And so I love being at a place where, young folks don't have to wait their turn. There's plenty to do for them to get their shot now and start helping people learn how to do that. And so that is one way, is creating those conditions. Another is we removed a requirement that I thought was restrictive, that you had to have a master's degree before you could come to PolicyLink. In some cases, I don't think you need any degree at all. But you lose a lot of talent waiting for folks to get master's degrees. And I don't necessarily think it's better thinking all the time. That's one way. Another way is when you're surrounded by young people, you'll stay on the leading edge of the work. So if you're on the leading edge of the work, people will be inspired. So often the reason why we're in conflict is because the work is too small. To your point, Nate, young people are coming into these orgs and they're like, what you doing? It's not even what's necessary. It ain't benefiting anybody. And so what I love is having an agenda that is big enough for folks to come in, and we're not debating whether we should do the work or not. We're debating how to do it. And so I think it's important to have that energy as you describe, because it will keep you at the leading edge of the work. And I think you only get there and stay there with youth. And then the last thing I would say is it's one thing to be young, and it's another to begin to master skills as a leader, skills as an institution builder. And I love being able to work with young people today to say, how do you go get this money, as an example? Because we're confused by a lot of things we hear. We say all the money is the oppressor's money, but then you're going to run an organization where you got to fundraise. That shit don't compute. But you got to make peace with that now before you become an ED, because you don't pay bills on that philosophy. Right? And so there are things like that folks need to know. How do you talk to a board? When do you take stuff to a board? We get to have all of those conversations now with young people so that by the time they get to their mid to late 20s, if not sooner, they can run an organization effectively and hold on to it. And I think we don't have enough leaders today that actually know how to build strong institutions. They have great ideas, but you think right now, this last thing I'll say, how many of-color-led organizations can you go work for where you don't have to take a pay cut? You don't have to take a reputational hit because it ain't the best thing out there. And that's the scariest thing to me right now, that as we have the most educated group of young people, they actually don't really have a lot of safe homes to go to do their soul work. And so the last thing I'll say is that PolicyLink needs to be a place where people can do their soul work. Because I know most brothers that show up like how I show up don't even get a chance in the field. Don't even get a shot. And so I love being at a place where you can be bold, you can be you. Folks ain't scared of you. But folks ain't trying to tell you lower your voice, make yourself small because I'm intimidated by you. You can be in all your blackness, all your whateverness. And I think that's really important for us to have so that people can survive. Because it's one thing to get in the door, it's another to be able to stay there and to have somebody who can check you but not fire you simply because you're learning.
That is a great sentiment. And I want to switch over to you, Anika. You play a really important role, both as an executive, but as somebody who is also lifting as you climb and creating spaces, especially for other female women identifying executives. Can you share a little bit about your role as a mentor and why you invest in that?
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I've been able to afford a lot of opportunities in a very short period of time. People used to say I was the youngest person to do blah, 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 blah. And I used to be the youngest person in the room. That is no longer. That's okay. But what I have realized in the career that I've been able to develop and the rooms that I'm in now, that it is crucially important to make sure that other women also have this, especially women of color, have the same opportunities. So I'm often, when they asked us to, think about your own mentorship relationships, I get asked all the time to be a mentor to other women. And, my response is always yes. The key to a really good relationship, mentoring relationship, the difference between sit down for coffee and, whatever your plan is and 5-year goals and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to talk to you at least once a month. I'm going to talk to you at least once a week. We're doing this on a regular basis to get me to where I want to go, is that relationship. And how you build those relationships. Mentorships are often friendships. I've had the same mentor for all 30 years of my entire career. Same mentor. And when I was a young woman, when I was the youngest in the room, I used to talk to her every single morning at 8 a.m. Every single morning. That's how I started my day. And she got me into rooms where I never thought. I have a master's in social work, right? I'm the worst social worker University of Michigan ever graduated. Do not ever bring me your problems or tell anyone to talk to me about anything. I'm now on I'm on both the Federal Reserve Bank Board for Chicago and the Federal Home Loan Bank Board in Indianapolis. And I'm leading the only and largest think tank in Detroit, right, for economic development. I know that young women are looking at me. They're following me, and they should, because I shouldn't be the only in any of these things. And so being intentional about other women in particular and other women of color is just, I can't tell you, it makes my own career better. And exactly as you said, we have to have places where we can, where we're not the only. And there's always someone right behind you waiting to take your seat. And that's how we should not be thinking that being the only is a treasured, you ain't special, boo. You ain't special in this room. We all have to be able to have other people there in order to make the change that we want to see.
Thank you so much for that response. Piggybacking off of the conversation around mentorship for you both, Michael and Anika, Lynette and Yasmin, your organizations do a lot of programming, a lot of work, and some of the more particular work you all do is run fellowships. How do you all, in this world of fellowships, Anika and Michael, you brought up perseverance in your comments, and often we're seeing in younger millennials and Gen Z that there's this gap sometimes in that perseverance muscle and building it up. They're struggling to, some generation of they're just feeling a lot. It's harder to get started. There's some stereotypes, right? But there's also this research being done around this perseverance gap. How do you all in your fellowships think about the culture of learning, especially as you think about, you all serve mid-career professionals as well as young people, younger folks in their career. How do you all build on that perseverance and provide that safe space to, I think you said, Michael, be checked but not fired, right? And give them that space to fail forward and keep it moving.
It's a great question. I think, so for Hispanics in Philanthropy, we have our Líderes Fellowship, and that fellowship brings together 30 mid-career professionals, Latina professionals, both in philanthropy and nonprofit. But we actually don't focus on perseverance. So a different hat that I wear is an executive and professional coach through a healing-centered lens. And I was trained by Leslie Avant Brown, an amazing dope black ICF certified black woman from the Bay. And there's only 2 ICF programs that are led by black women in the US that you can get certified. And that sucks. There should be more, right? But I say that because our fellowship is actually rooted in healing centered progress. Because to your point, for the most part, all of our young people that are coming to us, our mid-career, especially our mid-career folks, are coming to us with these professional traumatic wounds because they haven't had the mentorship or the coaching or someone who has said, what you're experiencing is normal. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm here to talk about it. And there's nothing wrong with you, right? There's absolutely nothing. There's nothing dysfunctional about you. You have been working in white dominant cultures, rooted in white supremacy, who have made you feel small. And you need to learn how to put that down and let that go to do the work that we need to do ahead for all of our communities. And when I tell you all that it takes almost our entire 9 months together for them to put that down, because they don't realize that they've been wearing this like armor and it's been weighing them down as they're moving through white supremacy culture. And so we actually don't vote. We look at perseverance from a different perspective of actually coming back to your most authentic self, first and foremost, of who you were before you were impacted by all the traumatic professional shit that you went through. Because that at the root was your soul work. That's what brought you to the work. And somewhere in the middle, we got so caught up on the next thing, on the next promotion, the next salary, the next thing, that they stop and we get them to pause and reflect and to realize, is this who I need to be right now? Is this who I am becoming in this next chapter of my life? And yes, they learn like budgeting and like how to talk to funders and all this other like transforming philanthropic practice work and trust-based philanthropy work. But for us, like even if they want to be trained in how do you have courageous or difficult conversations about a promotion, means nothing if you don't value yourself as a human, as a person first and foremost, and understand your worth without productivity, right? And so we really center on their spiritual, emotional health first and foremost before we can get them to the rest of it. And I mean it. We get them to Puerto Rico and we have to say, you can't take calls. We don't want you to be on Zooms. There's a beach here. I want to see you on the beach in the next 3 hours, right? And so and they have to be given permission. Like they need to hear you can rest. And it sucks that we, especially I think as like millennial folks, and this is where I think the mentorship model has come in, where it's like we are able to be in community with others and even hear from them to say, we weren't able to rest. So you have to rest to be able to do this work. And we had a great conversation at dinner last night with a few folks about this, right? We have to be able to come back to our young people, especially our mid-career folks, and because they're not okay. Right? They've been shouldering a lot, they've been carrying a lot, and we need our elder, or not like elder, but like our older generation to come, and there's lessons there for us to receive, and there's gifts there around resilience and perseverance that we have to be open to, and at the same time, being able to teach our mid-career folks that you don't have to wear an armor, but you can wear a cloak. And this is a cloak that you can choose to take on and take off, but it doesn't fully define you nor weigh you down. And I think that is, coming from Denver, Colorado, where the Chicano movement was big, that's one thing that the Chicano movement failed us because they didn't build intergenerational, intersectional movements. They built them in isolation of one another, and it didn't allow us to move the work forward, but also prepare our younger generations for how do you still hold yourself accountable in terms of what it means to speak truth to power, but you still have to work in a white dominant space. And then they're beating us down in that environment. So we really needed our elders to come back and say, listen, yes, like viva la raza, and you're probably going to be an accountant. So like, how do you navigate? Teach me how to not viva la raza as an accountant and not lose myself, because that wasn't taught down to us, right? And so I think we are really trying to be able to say, you can work in this system, because we need to be in these systems, right? But you don't have to lose yourself or beat yourself up anymore as you do it. So, yeah.
Got it. All right. Kind of torn about where to enter this question because I also, even though we discussed this as a cross-generational panel, I too don't want to sort of fetishize too many differences. I think some of it is whether it's millennial, Gen X, whatever generation, some of it is just life stage, right? Experience, what you've done so far. Because there was a time when, we were slacker Gen X's and couldn't do anything either, right? But lie on the couch and watch MTV or whatever that was. But to the point about perseverance, I think it's easy for older people to say that about younger folks when it's easy to get discouraged when you get so many no's, when folks slam the door in your face 1,000 times to your ideas, which, I had 1,000 million ideas when I was young. Not all of them were fully baked, but, when you have great mentors, they'll find the kernel of that is wonderful and magical and help you sharpen that and get better and get more thoughtful and turn it into something fantastic and maybe show them something they hadn't seen yet. But unfortunately, there are, I think, so many people who are older who need it to be a certain structured way, the way it was always done, and not enough people. And to take the time to slow down and attend to and pay attention to younger voices, because it does take time. And I think when, there's a period where if you don't catch people when they still have that great spark, that can go out or die, right? And you really don't want to do that. I mean, I know I was one of them, again, sometimes mentoring can be a lot of work, but it can be really magical when you help sort of cultivate that fire people have inside, and we really need that. So I think if you're not creating pathways for people, helping them light their paths, and then also to make sure that you're giving them the time to create the world in which they want it to be instead of imposing on them your ideas of what it should be. That also is a problem. That's another way of getting told no, right? Well, no, this is the way you need to be doing it. So I think that it's easy to say it's lack of perseverance or lack of resilience when it really is discouragement, when there are not enough of us creating pathways and building platforms for younger generations. And one of some conversations that I've been having with folks on this Gen X panel is like, what are we leaving? I say leaving, I don't want to die soon, but what are we building for the next generation of leaders who are going to take over? As Michael mentioned, there aren't a lot of spaces where you can go and do your soul work and not have to be in a dominant culture institution and grit your teeth or put the armor on. But sadly, that the reality is that's what it is, right? To be in those spaces and be smart, to be able to stay, to keep your sanity, to advance and have your ideas respected and valued. I mean, it is the sort of constant work. You kind of forget that you are carrying all of that, as you mentioned, right? That you're going to get second and third and fourth guests on like things that you bring up, especially when the work is meant to be strategic or intellectual or anything of that nature. And actually, it was the founder of PolicyLink, Michael's former boss and my board chair. When I was first starting to try to create the policy academies, I was explaining to her what my goals and what I was trying to do and the mission. And she told me, that, could you repeat yourself? And I thought, well, what do you mean? In my head, I didn't, I said, okay. And I thought about it and I realized that this was one of the first times I had presented something. I made a statement. She accepted it at first pass because I was used to, I'm going in, I'm going to give you 360 of everything. I got backup plans, backup arguments. I'm ready for every question you have for me to tell you why this thing's going to work. And she was like, okay, stop. I sat there stunned, right? I mean, I'm like, it made me realize the water I was swimming in where this woman who's exceptional automatically took me seriously, saw all the way through that the plan was fantastic and well thought out, and not having to tap dance 1,000 times, and then knowing I have to come back with additional, responses to whatever questions they might have. So, I mean, we don't have enough of those spaces, right? Enough of those people out there who can do that for us and with us. I don't have the answer for that, but part of it is how do we build strong institutions so that, next generations aren't carrying the same weight as they go on their leadership journey.
Thank you, Lynette. And I think that segues nicely to your work, Nathaniel. I think all of the panelists have talked about the importance of valuing the different perspectives that our various generations bring and creating space for those in a way that allows you to learn, grow, contribute, and feel free to innovate and be part of these policy conversations and changes. And Nathaniel, with your work, you have created a program that does a lot of those things. Could you share a little bit more about the Yes for Equity program and the ways that you're incorporating young voices into your policy work?
Sure, and I'll be as brief as I can. So I came out of having parents that were engaged in the Southern Freedom Movement, and they imparted, as well as other leaders, a level of passion and really understanding about what freedom work really is and what it requires in order to be impactful and not lose your soul, right? And so for me, it's always been about understanding the importance of supporting young people and being very intentional about growing the next generation of leaders that we need, and not wait at the last minute when we have one foot in the grave and another on a banana peel before we begin to think about who our next leaders are. And so about 4 years ago, I had an opportunity, partnership with Southern Equity, not I, but my organization, had an opportunity to acquire a national organization based in Durham called Youth Empowered Solutions. They had done work for many years as it related to youth power building work. And as opposed to really PSC trying to start from scratch, I wanted to really bring in an organization that had a certain level of expertise and also kind of connect that to my own experience as an organizer to really create a serious apparatus inside of the organization that could intentionally not only grow the next generation of racial equity leaders, but also put young people using PSC's platform on the forefront of systems transformation work, right? Of the work that is required, in which I believe young people have to be on the front lines leading and not just at the table. And so we started Yes for Equity. And not only did we start Yes for Equity, but we also use that as an opportunity to embed young leaders in every aspect of our organization. So every portfolio area has a young leader engaged in Yes for Equity. It is connected to the work, is also an organizer with Yes for Equity. We also put our staff through adult ally training, which Youth Empowered Solutions was very much known for us, because we wanted to make sure that the adults were ready to receive young leadership, but also we wanted to make sure that the culture of Yes was palatable to the culture of PSC, right? Because you have to make sure that it's a fit. And so it took a certain amount of time for that fit to occur, which allowed both PSC to grow and also the youth staff who were involved in Youth Power Solutions. We also have a book club in the organization that the young people lead every month, where they go through a book that they're reading and are encouraging some of the more senior leaders to be actively involved. They also are actively involved in our advocacy work, our research work, and they have their own agenda that they work to advance. And so we've been very intentional about making sure that young people are a part of every element of the organization, that they are valued, that they are positioned to lead, but they also, from more senior and seasoned leaders, understand, as you said, about the resilience question, Michael, that this is a marathon, right? And you are not going to undo structural racism in a grant cycle, right? Or you're not going to become Michael McAfee in a year or two. And guess what? One day you're going to fail. And as opposed to crying and wanting to throw your hands up and jump out of the window, how do you fail forward, right? In a way that you can learn from your lessons. So, I mean, it's been a great experience. And like I said before, we have boomers on our staff all the way down to high school students. Our Yes for Equity initiative, we have about 20 youth organizers who organize around the country around various issues. They train adults and young people on how to be more effective organizers through our value-based organizing strategy. So yeah, they're fully incorporated. And does it work all the time? No. Do I have to tell the youth staff sometimes? No. Yeah, this sounds good, but no. Yes. And sometimes we have some pretty passionate conversations about various contemporary issues where certain segments of the community try to conflate the Black liberation struggle with their struggle. And I'm like, no, that's their struggle. We have our own struggle, and that's okay. So we have very interesting conversations, but I guess my whole point about this, and I didn't mean to talk this long, is that you have to be intentional about creating infrastructure in your organization that can receive and benefit from youth engagement. And if you don't do that, then you're really missing out. Really missing out.
Thank you so much, Nathaniel. And to all of our panelists, we're going to switch to Q&A, but can we give them a round of applause first for all the gems dropped? Appreciate you all. Our Gen X plus one millennial panel, appreciate you all. And all the similarities that you all talked about too across two generations and stuff. But let's bring in more folks in the room and start with Q&A. I'll hand over the mic to whoever wants to kick us off. Okay, we'll start here and then we'll go ahead over to you.
So first of all, thank you for the panel. It was amazing. My name is Augusto. I'm from Brazil. I'm Gen Z, and sometimes, as LeBron said on the commercial when he got the greatest points ever, sometimes we are afraid to call our own shots, and not afraid to fail too, but afraid to be ashamed. So we as Black people, surrounded by not just white people, but white people that are not allies. What kind of advice you told for us to not just build a community, but build a strong community that we do not be afraid to fail. So we have colleagues. We do not have rivals on the team. So thank you for that.
Well, okay, quick. So one of the things that I think and when I talk about this society and Western thought, there's a lot of focus on the individual. There's a great focus on rugged individualism and I. And one of the things that has helped me to be comfortable with failing forward is understanding that you are part of something bigger than you, right? That the work that you're doing is bigger than you, and you are standing on the shoulders of people who've made several mistakes so you can be closer to the finish line than they were. So I think if you're able to really understand that you're connected to something bigger, and that the mistakes that you may make will also help to ensure that the people that come after you won't make those same mistakes, I think it's a lot easier for you to manage that than saying, oh, I made a mistake and the world is going to end. Because the world is going to keep spinning, right? But you have to understand that. But it's about what contribution can you make that will honor your ancestors, but at the same time position the people that will come after you to get closer to the finish line.
I just want to add to that, because you said Gen Z, yes? So that's also 20s, yes? So this part is it doesn't matter, millennial, whatever. 20s are just the age of anxiety, I think, for whomever, right? You are becoming an adult, you're becoming who you're meant to be, and you have to figure that out. Who am I? What do I want to be in the world? What are my talents? What are my gifts? What am I good at? What am I not good at? Where do I have to bone up on this? I mean, you're leaving your family, whatever life that is, and whether it's a college community or another, experiencing the world as a grown-up when there's really not a blueprint for how to do that, no matter what all the guides and self-help books are, right? So I know I was riddled with anxiety all of my 20s. I mean, you fake it, right? I mean, so I kept going anyway, right? You just persist through, the mistakes you're going to make, but you just stay on your path, right? Just be true to yourself. I think, as Nathaniel said, just keep checking in. What is it that I want, right? And you're going to stumble. There'll be setbacks. This is part of life, right? So, but they all feel like they're fatal and final in your 20s, at least it did to me. When you do have setbacks and, I think finding the right support system in that, right? If you have friends who believe in you and on that path, you want peers, support network, mentoring network. I've made mistakes where then, you go hide from them. Like, I should have just talked to that mentor about it. It was actually not really that big a deal now that I look back. And that's part of why I created the program that I did. It's like to help just light that path. Like, okay, maybe that's not the best way. How about try this, right? You were 90% there or 75% there, right? You missed 25%. It's not a big deal. That little correction has you right in your path, right? So expect to stumble. Most of these things are fixable in the long run. But you haven't had enough experience. I don't mean to sound condescending to see, okay, that wasn't that big a mistake. Like I've just learned over time to spot the mistakes that I'm making earlier and start correcting earlier.
Thank you. One more question, and then we can network with folks at the reception.
Good evening. My name is Wendy Ellis. I'm the director for the Center for Community Resilience at George Washington University. Michael, there was something that you said with regard to attracting young people and their soul work. So being a research center that's really focused on equity, really working in communities, going deep dive work in communities, of course, it attracts all of the young people who just want to burn down the patriarchy and, and overturn structural racism overnight. But I'm also, in a position where I'm in the ivory tower, one of the strictest structures of structural racism ever. And so having to find that balance where I want to keep them motivated every day and I want them to go out and make that change, but also having to balance that with the reality of, look, I'm on tenure track. There's certain things I'm going to have to do. This is not a flat organization because of the organization I'm within. And then I get a pushback of, well, how can you expect us to go out and do equity work if we can't do equity work within? And it's like, well, we are. But we're doing it within the structures that we are doing it in. And so I guess my question for you is, how do we balance with our young people an understanding of how far we can push our limits and still be making progress? And it's not a compromise. But I am never going out into community and asking community folks to lose their job in the effort to do this work. And yet there are often times where my team is pushing me to do things where I'm like, do y'all want me here or not? Because if I'm not here, we don't have a center. So how do you balance that reality with our young folks?
See, I think that is the work. I think some people have to touch the stove to know it's hot. We need to be able to create spaces for people to be able to do that and survive it, right? That's part of the challenge. But I think one of the most important things we can teach young people is to decide where they want to work. See, I hear too much confusion. I hear you want to lead a liberating fight, but then you want to rest. Shit's incompatible. It's incompatible, folks. I mean, we're getting our ass kicked structurally by folks who are working around the clock. And you tell me you want to work 9 to 5. That's bullshit. I'm gonna be honest. You're not trying to win a war. So I want you to be clear about what you really want to do. Don't be like my group when we was up in the 90s wearing medallions and shit and didn't even know what the hell they meant, right? Don't use language that you really ain't got the heart for. It's easy to say, I want to burn shit down, get rid of capitalism. When you sitting on your own home equity, you ain't getting rid of it. When you say you want to make at least 6 figures, it's bullshit. So I want to create a space where people can reconcile these intellectual inconsistencies. And so at PolicyLink, that's why I don't want you fighting with each other, because I want you to go prove that shit. You got the freedom to go prove it. If you believe get rid of capitalism today, go prove it. But start with getting rid of your bank account, getting rid of your home equity. Go on down the line. I want you to prove it in the world. So I think we really do have to get clear. What are we trying to do with our lives? See, I think it's okay to put everything and go to the wall. That's for some people. It ain't for everybody. But what I see right now is I tell people, I meet with everybody at PolicyLink because I tell them, don't come here with this bullshit. Don't come to PolicyLink thinking you're not coming to try to fight in the revolution, because you are. Now I'm going to give you unlimited leave but you're going to work your ass off. You're not going to change the excellence standard because you got more mouth than you do heart. And I don't care how old you are. PolicyLink is not going to be an organization that ain't going to be on the leading edge of the movement. That's just the reality. And so I think everybody has to decide it's not an age thing. It's just a lot of old folks who still ain't figured out what the hell they want to be. But I think one of the best things you can do when you're young is figure out where you want to really play, become a master in that spot, and then life becomes so much easier. And that's probably the biggest thing that I see right now, which is folks haven't committed to a path. They haven't committed to a path that is their path. It may be their parents' path, maybe their friend's path, but it's not their path. And I think that's what I mean when I say soul work. When you do that, it's yours. Nobody else can speak on it. My wife can't speak on it. My family can't speak on it. It's mine. And when you do that work, you can't take that shit away from me. You can fire me at PolicyLink, but you can't stop me. And that's what's needed. Young people need to choose now. The freest young people have ever been of color. I want you not to be delusional that what you are up against is a cakewalk. It's going to require your ass to fight and get punched in the mouth and get back up to work around the damn clock sometimes. And I think people are okay with that when they know that there's balance and you're not just extracting them. I don't find young people don't want to work hard. But we all do have to choose. And I've had to let people go at PolicyLink because they got more mouth than they do heart. And so what I really want you to begin to think about is, how do we create the space for young people to figure out and reconcile and make peace with? Capitalism ain't going nowhere tomorrow when rap music isn't owed to capitalism. So how do we even migrate our own people from that path to something new? See, to me, that's where the richness of ideas come. If you can see the reality from a street smart way, you can create the next generation of leaders who don't just have rhetoric that gets you an amen on this stage, but they got the rhetoric and the insights that will change the nation. And that's what's needed right now. We got too many people that can perform. We don't have enough people who can critically say, you know what? I'm a practical revolutionary. I know if I'm in that white-led institution, that's a different game than if I'm in a grassroots organization. And the last thing I'll say is this. Our movement is so hypocritical in this regard. Nobody who has ever left PolicyLink has gone to the fucking ground. They done gone to Citibank, less equitable than PolicyLink. Facebook, less equitable than PolicyLink. I can keep on going down the damn list. These are all people that talk all this shit. But if you go pull up PolicyLink and see all the people who've worked at PolicyLink and look at where they went, none of their asses went to the fucking ground. None of their asses went to a more revolutionary place. So what I'm asking you to do is stop selling bullshit that you don't even believe. Make a decision for real, folks, because this is what's destroying people. Those people that I'm talking about on LinkedIn, they've destroyed their careers because the worst thing you can do is play games and not choose. And then you start making good money, but you ain't got the heart to sustain that good money. And then you lose it. And now if you look at some of those folks I'm talking about, PolicyLink and LinkedIn, all they have is a career of job hopping. They don't have a career of legacy building and transformation for their people. They got job hopping, but I can guarantee you if they were sitting in here, they'd be talking so much shit. So I'm trying to tell you folks, let's get real about what we see out in the world. Go look up PolicyLink and LinkedIn and see what you see from people and see where they go. So that revolutionary rhetoric sounds good, but I ain't seeing it. I especially don't see it when you get kids. Doesn't mean you can't be revolutionary, folks, but know where you're at. A white-led institution at a university, that ain't the place. Necessarily. It doesn't mean it doesn't have a role. So let's all just learn how to play our role. Play the right role for the institution we're in. And when it's not the right time for us, move on to the next institution.
On that note, may we all continue to go out and build our legacies and transform the systems and be sure that we are encouraging youth in those conversations and we're building each other up. So thank you again to our panel and the moderators. And I believe we have a quick announcement from Cordell.
Please give this panel another hand. You all were talking revolution here. I was like, man, I'm outside trying to get things started. I want to hear the revolution talk. At any rate, reception starts right away. We're in the pavilion, the same place as last night. If we can please head there, because there's an after party that you have to get in the van to because we're going in a favela. So get downstairs, please. That's my point. Thank you.
Fancy cameras.
It's a large, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, it's